But the purpose of Nick being on Tucker's show was not to go and shock Tucker Carlson's audience. I really want to hammer this point home because there's going to be some people who are disappointed, and even I have expressed disappointment that Nick didn't go further on certain subjects, didn't press Tucker Carlson harder. Nick knew that going on Tucker Carlson's show was the opportunity of a lifetime to introduce himself to millions of people who were previously completely ignorant of who he was or had only heard about him and had particularly only heard negative things about him. And so if he goes on there and makes the most controversial statements and starts talking about how the Jews are behind every single culturally subversive movement in America, no matter how much truth there is to that statement, that is not necessarily strategically the best thing to do for the time and place of that interview with Tucker Carlson. Thinking a bit beyond the immediate moment and the compulsion to just go there and do the bucket of ice water on people. This isn't hitting play on Europa the Last Battle in front of millions of people. That's not the situation.
The destruction of human freedom. But like every one of the super states that preceded it, it has one iron rule. Logic is an enemy and truth is a menace.
You simply change what's being promoted. A good example that's coming up here in the question and answer session is the situation with pornography. We can go ahead and hit that now. Tucker asked Nick, what's up with the porn thing? He's an older guy. He kind of missed that whole wave, but he knows it's a problem. And so Nick says, porn is basically reality distortion because there's no way for your average woman to compete with a 10 out of 10 porn model, one of them. There's no way for them to compete with a harem of porn models. We don't have to go into detail about that. There's no way to compete with them for the novelty and the variety and the instant access 24/7. For the real life, actual blood and flesh woman to compete with the sexual draw of pornography. That's one matter. That is anti-female, but it is also anti-life. It's anti-Christian, obviously. Tucker brings up an important part of the pornography conversation where he talks about how it is also a vector of blackmail, where if you have political ambitions or ambitions to be any kind of noteworthy individual in society, even if it's not your ambition, but you end up there, then pornography is obviously one vector of blackmail that can be used against you to run these public smear campaigns and destroy your reputation, socially or professionally destroy you. And so who owns these pornography conversations is something that is alluded to. And Tucker says, obviously all this stuff is bad. It's bad for the spiritual health of the country, but also it opens up people to blackmail. And I think people who own websites like OnlyFans and MindGeek, the pornography empire that owns Pornhub, I think we should arrest those people. And it's like, yeah, based, obviously agree. Nick agrees. All of us Christian nationalists would agree with something like that. This is a little bit of a missed opportunity here because Tucker brings it up. He opens the door. Nick could have said, who was it that advocated for the legalization of pornography, hardcore pornography, under the auspices of free speech? How did that legislation change? Who pioneered that? Who is it that actually owns Pornhub? Who is it that actually owns OnlyFans? Who happens to be the single largest donor to AIPAC and they're lobbying for the genocide in Gaza? Who is it that runs these things? What group of people seems to have a disproportionate role in ownership of these pornography empires? There is a long history of Jewish ownership, pornography, how they knew that it was anti-Christian, specifically anti-Catholic, and savoring the poisoning of the well of Christianity in America through the promotion of pornography. That's well documented. Nick could have used this opportunity to say, hey, we just had a conversation about group behavior. Remember that? And you said, it's not all Jews, blah, 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 blah. Well, listen, I agree that it's not all Jews. There's plenty of Jews who don't participate and don't promote in pornography. Okay, gotcha. But guess what observable pattern is true? The promotion of it, just like the promotion of feminism, just like the promotion of legalizing gay marriage, just like the promotion of open borders and reforming the immigration policy in America to be expanded beyond just Western European people, The common trend amongst all of these things that have eroded the demographics and the cultural fabric and the spiritual fabric of the nation, there are Jewish thought leaders behind every single one of them. Not exclusively, but when you're talking about 2% of the population, why is it that they are continually identified at the helm of every single one of these culturally Marxist movements, satanic, frankly, movements, the legalization of gambling, legalization of abortion, as I said, gay marriage, the promotion of feminism, the legalization of pornography? Over and over again, we see these things. And so, that could have been an opportunity to talk about that commonality with Tucker. But as I said before, it's already a 2-hour interview, and there's only so much you can go over in one thing. And there's only, realistically speaking, so far Nick knows he can press these topics on a platform like Tucker Carlson. Because at the end of the day, we need to remember this, and this is something I probably should have said sooner. The purpose of Nick being there last night, I'm sure it was filmed before then, but the purpose of Nick being on Tucker's show was not to go and shock Tucker Carlson's audience. This is very important. I really want to hammer this point home because there's going to be some people who are disappointed, and even I have expressed disappointment that Nick didn't go further on certain subjects, didn't press Tucker Carlson harder, wasn't a bit more detailed about group behavior and so on and so forth. To be fair, Nick knew that going on Tucker Carlson's show was the opportunity of a lifetime to introduce himself to millions of people who were previously completely ignorant of who he was or had only heard about him and had particularly only heard negative things about him. And so if he goes on there and makes the most controversial statements and starts talking about how the Jews are behind every single culturally subversive movement in America, no matter how much truth there is to that statement, that is not necessarily strategically the best thing to do for the time and place of that interview with Tucker Carlson. So that's an important caveat that I want to make there, especially as it relates to who is behind these different cultural movements and whether or not it was appropriate to draw that entire constellation right then and there on Tucker Carlson's show. Laying out some breadcrumbs, okay, but doing the entire dissertation on Jewish influence and how commonly they are found to be subverting the most important things about America, its demographic, its culture, and its spirituality. As I said, it's commonly found. It's not exclusive. We have to make that asterisk. But time and place are important. Reading the room is important. Nick protecting his ascendancy is important. And so thinking a bit beyond the immediate moment and the compulsion to just go there and do the bucket of ice water on people, this isn't hitting play on Europa the Last Battle in front of millions of people, okay? That's not the situation.
Meeting the people that you actually want to meet this day and age is basically impossible. Well, I have a solution to these problems. You're wearing your anti-Zog merchandise, that cutie from across the gym. She knows what the Zog is. She knows that Save Europa is code for white genocide. Or if it's somebody of the same gender, boom, you just got yourself a new best friend. This is your opportunity. Everybody's always complaining about how hard it is to find people who know what's really going on. Well, this is it. This is how you broadcast those beliefs to the world.
So following up, though, on the cultural subjects, particularly feminism, Tucker, he makes an apology, which I thought was actually very humbling. He says, one of the reasons I called you gay is because you're not married. And, I'm sorry. I apologize for that statement. And then he says, general question for you, though, having made that apology, why is nobody getting married? So I appreciated first and foremost that Tucker said that he apologized for calling him gay. I think that's a very humble thing to do, and I'm glad he did it. But the question, more importantly, asking why nobody is getting married, he wanted Nick's opinion on that. And Nick has talked at great length in regards to the woman problem. And this is one that is far more controversial in mainstream conservatism. They don't want to acknowledge that there is a woman problem. They can say that there's a problem with the relationship between the genders, and they maybe even say that this feminism, whatever wave we're on now, I don't even know, but feminism and the dynamic between the genders is clearly a problem. But they don't want to just say, no, there is an actual woman problem. Yes, there is a male problem too. Men have unique problems, women have unique problems, but in terms of who is putting the ship on a trajectory toward an iceberg at the moment, the cowardice of men is obviously a problem, but the insistence of women indoctrinated by the school of feminism is a more substantial problem. And it is more responsible for the answer to Tucker's question, which was, why are people not getting married? And so Nick points out, with no apologies, the problem is that the overwhelming majority of women in this country are very, very liberal. And this is backed by polling data. It's backed by voting data. For example, not long ago, there was a poll that came out that ranked the number of different political issues as determined by men, as determined by women, and particularly young men and young women. And I think there was 12 of them, something like that. And it talks about, immigration policy, access to healthcare, the economy, free speech, foreign wars, all the different political parties you might look at when determining who you want to vote for. And it bifurcated these results by gender among the young population. And the number one issue in terms of male voting pattern was securing the ability to have a family. Very, very telling. Keep in mind, this is among young conservatives. So young conservative men, the number one political issue that they have, the number one priority in their life is, how easy is it for me to have a family? When looking at the young females of our country, that very same issue was at the complete bottom of the list, 12 out of 12. Okay? That tells you something, that they are on opposite ends of the spectrum. The number one North Star guiding all young conservative men is, how can I find a wife and have kids? The very last concern of young women in this country is, how can I find a husband and have kids? Financial freedom, autonomy in the society, ability to do whatever they want, career success, all of these things matter more to women than they do to men. Men's North Star is, I want to be a dad and I want to be a husband and I want to repopulate this country with my progeny. Women, it is a complete afterthought. I got to build my career. I got to get educated. I want financial freedom and I want social freedom. I want sexual promiscuity if I want it. That is just one barometer of how far apart the two genders are right now among the young people in this country and why they're not getting married. 60% of the young women in this country identify openly, happily, as feminist. Okay, well, that's a rejection of the patriarchy. That's a rejection of God's design for humankind. So you have 60% of the people who should be getting married, half of that equation, rejecting God's will, rejecting the patriarchy. There's a 45-point voting difference in terms of voting conservative versus liberal across the genders. 99% of abortions in this country, obviously conducted exclusively by women because only women can get pregnant. 99% of all abortions are elective. They are not medical emergencies. They are women who had sex with men who they were not prepared to have children with. This is a lack of accountability and a promotion of promiscuity and sexual liberation. This is how women are currently operating. Obviously, you have the matter of no-cause divorce, where a woman can simply decide that she is just unhappy. I want to go back to focusing on my career. I don't like the way you have changed. I don't like X, Y, Z. It doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with domestic abuse. It can be for any reason under the sun. It's why it's called no-cause divorce. The overwhelming majority of no-cause divorces are requested by women. I hate to say it. There's obviously the matter of physical health. Most of them are overweight. This isn't unique to women, but this is just how people are treating themselves with no dignity, no respect for the temple that houses the Holy Spirit, for the gift of a physical body on this earth. There's no respect for that. Porn obviously is undermining the ability to find loving, lifelong, monogamous relationships. On the male side of the spectrum, because the reasons why people aren't getting married, they're not exclusively due to women's behavior. You have the simping behavior from men. Keep in mind the phenomenon of OnlyFans, right? It's a great example of this. 10% of all young women in America, 18 to 24, are on OnlyFans. 10% of the young women in America are prostitutes. Everybody needs to let that sink in. But before you go and blame the women for being degenerate and so on and so forth, all of them are on OnlyFans receiving money from customers. And there are exponentially more customers than there are prostitutes. So the young men are simping and throwing money at strange women in exchange for some kind of sexual dynamic, whether it's pictures of nudes, videos, chats, whatever it may be. It's just modern digitized prostitution. And so both sides are complicit in this. And when porn acts as a surrogate for actual romantic relationships, and in this weird new world where it's providing an economic opportunity for women to establish financial independence, these things all being interconnected, partially why nobody's getting married, partially why the spiritual decay of the country is in free fall, they're all interconnected. Women think that they are now empowered with the pursuit of being prostitutes, and the men who are driven by lust always have been, unfortunately. This is the nature of us living in a fallen world and the apostasy from the church. These things happening and converging at the same time means nobody's getting married. Because nobody's getting married, nobody's having kids, which has opened up the door for the invitation of millions of immigrants to come, because allegedly, without inviting in these millions of immigrants, then our GDP will collapse, we'll have a recession, a depression, and so on and so forth. And then finally, on the subject of why nobody is getting married and the dynamic between the genders being rather chaotic right now, I think Nick says perhaps even the most important part of this whole part of the discussion, and that is that men are still, even in this gynocentric age of feminism being completely out of control, women being out of control, not held accountable for their own behavior or how their behavior is influencing society. Still, men are expected to be the ones who eventually have the buck stop there. At the end of the day, men have to be the safeguards of society. We are the protectorate, right? We accept this. There is no getting out of this responsibility. When there are women and children around, whether it's on a sinking lifeboat, a store that's being robbed, a house that's burning down, it is written into the social code, no matter what religion you are, no matter what ethnicity you are living in America, at least, you save the women and children. Men sacrifice themselves, put themselves on the front lines. That's obviously true in our military. 9 out of 10 deaths in war are men. Same with PTSD, same with injuries, amputations, so on and so forth. Same with these suicides coming back home from war. These are uniquely male, self-sacrificing circumstances. Men bear the brunt of all of these responsibilities of protecting the society. And historically, the exchange was, well, that sounds really hard. The fact that you might have to literally sacrifice your life for your household, your community, your nation, your faith, whatever it may be. Okay, the exchange then is that you get to have authority over the women. That's not to say that they are your slave, and it's not to say that you can do anything you want at any time you please to them, but it is to say that if you're going to impose the expectation of responsibility for the safety, the providence, the well-being of the population and the individual households on men, then you have to defer authority to them. It's very simple. And right now, men are not granted that authority. Unfortunately, this has become the norm for government. It's become the norm in the education system, and it's become the norm in the household, that there is no hierarchical structure to any of these things as it relates to the gender. What do you mean that men should be the ones running the government? Why? I'm saying what the liberal argument is here. If men and women are interchangeable, they have the exact same hormonal temperament, they have the exact same abilities and gifts, why would men inherently be deserving of the leadership roles in our government? The same thing with education, the same thing with the church, the same thing with the household. Well, obviously women are not equally attributed, not hormonally, not physically, not in matters of discernment, not in matters of emotionality. And that's not a criticism of one or the other. This is just God's design. He designed us to be complementary with strengths and weaknesses that when together they synergize. But the burden of protection and providence has always been the male's responsibility. And because they are the ones who have to endure those responsibilities, they are gifted the authority. And this is obviously dictated in the Bible itself, but culturally as well. It was always the norm in America and all of Western civilization up through 1960, okay? And it is only in the inversion of this dynamic, in this gynocentric age, in this denialist, delusional state that we have been living in for our entire lives in this era of feminism, it is only under that model where women have rejected the authority of men and the sacred inheritances of men as the protectors and providers, where they want to have the fruit and eat it too. They want financial independence, social independence, the ability to climb the ladder in all different ranks of society. They want to also lead the churches. They want to lead the government. They want to be leaders of the household. They want the buck to stop with them until things get dangerous. Until things actually get challenging physically. When the lights go out, or when the homes are on fire, or when people are invading your neighborhood, suddenly then being tasked with the responsibility and the leadership isn't so important now, is it? Suddenly then we need the men to come and save the day. We need them to keep the power and the electricity, the lights, the plumbing. We need them to do all of that. And we need them to lay down the infrastructure. And we need them to go lay down their lives on the front lines of war. But we don't need them telling us what to do. And that is frankly an untenable arrangement. If you're going to put our lives in danger, then we ask in return for your trust that we will do the right thing to protect you. And at times we're going to come to disagreements, and you need to respect my authority in that. The reason I'm disagreeing with you, it's not because I'm trying to control you. It's not because I think that I'm just more intelligent or anything like that. It's because I'm trying to protect you. And that analogy applies at the household level and at the communal level and the national level. We need men in charge of the homes, the community, and the nation for protective reasons. It's not for oppressive reasons. I know that that's what is presented, but it is not the case. That is not the design of God. He gives us these unique attributes so that we can successfully defend our homes, our communities, our faith, our nations, our people. And so I think Nick did a good job of saying this is an untenable arrangement where men are given the responsibility. At the end of the day, the buck stops there, but women are not deferring to men's authority. And until that dynamic changes, people aren't going to be getting married, and the patriarchy won't be restored, and society will continue to crumble. So that takes us to the final part of the interview, where Tucker asks Nick, where do you see America in 5 years?
The few brave men who have actually tried to go out and do something about white genocide or talk about Jewish influence, the Zionist-occupied government, we all know that they get crucified, their careers get destroyed, and so we need to find ways to support each other. One of the ways that I have done that is by creating my Substack, where there are exclusive early access to documentaries, my weekly vlogs, there are ebooks there. There's even an opportunity to set up a one-on-one 30-minute Ask Me Anything if you'd like. All of the proceeds from my Substack, from my YouTube channel, from the merch gets reinvested in the platform. I use that to pay my employees. I use that to buy the equipment that I need, the cameras, the lights, the MacBook, all the books, all of the software, pay for marketing, everything else, but also it protects my literal life. So if you want to help out, please do head on to Substack, get yourself a subscription. Thank you. I appreciate it. America first, and Christ is King.